And I want to go ahead and start by welcoming everyone who's joining us today from around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Robin Beckham. I'm a policy analyst for sustainable land and water at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. And I'd love to welcome you to this webinar on behalf of the International Land Conservation Network. This is the second webinar in our series in collaboration with ALCA, focusing on enabling conservation in a rapidly changing world, which expands upon the Churchill Fellowship report produced by Dr. Jody Gunn, CEO of the Australia Land Conservation Alliance. Our previous webinar explored conservation finance, and if you missed it, a recording is available now at landconservationnetwork.org. This is the second webinar in the series focused on the role of alliances. And next week will be our final installment, which will cover the practice of land conservation. Links for the report, previous recording, and next week's registration will all be in the Zoom chat. With that, let me pass the mic to Dr. Jody Gunn, CEO of ALCA, to take it away. Jody?
Thank you so much, Robin, for that introduction, and to the International Land Conservation Network for co-hosting this webinar series with us. I'm joining tonight from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, known as Naarm or Melbourne, in the southern state of Victoria, Australia. And I acknowledge the deep and long-term connection that Australia's First Nations people have with this country, one of the longest connected cultures, existing with and being responsible for country for over 60,000 years. People's connection to place is fundamental to achieving environmental outcomes, and this connection is no more profound than through the eyes and experiences of Australia's First Nations people. As I weave my way through life, my underlying purpose has been to protect the unique species and ecosystems right across the globe, from elephants and baboons in the savanna plains of Africa to bettongs and donarts in rangeland Australia. However, despite the distances that I've travelled and the ecosystems I've researched, core to how I've engaged in this pursuit has been in understanding the relationships of people to place, exploring the dynamics and influences that shape people's interactions with wildlife and their impacts on this planet that we share. This interest, this curiosity, combined with my continuous drive to keep advancing our practice, it inspired me to complete a Churchill Fellowship. It's a unique opportunity to be supported to travel globally, to learn from others, and to bring those learnings back to my work and life in Australia, to continue to grow the organisation that I lead today, the Australian Land Conservation Alliance, that is scaling the protection, management and restoration of nature. So I have the privilege to travel from Quebec to Boston, from Washington to Missoula, from Bozeman to San Francisco. I met incredible people doing inspiring and amazing things. I made and solidified friendships that I hope last a lifetime. And I observed the rapid rate of change that came from a significant federal election. And after the travel was over, I returned home, I reflected, and I completed a report. But what is a report sitting on the online shelf, gathering online air dust? It's much more usefully shared, especially when I get to share the people that I met with along the way and to highlight their incredible work and their tireless commitment so that we might all continue to progress, to learn, to adapt and innovate. So today's discussion is the second, as Robin has said, of a three-part webinar series that'll bring to life the concepts, the ideas, the innovations and the people who are driving outcomes for our environment. This series is exploring what it takes to scale and sustain conservation impact in a rapidly changing world facing biodiversity loss, climate disruption, and increasing social and ecological complexity. Over 3 dynamic sessions, we're unpacking how funding, collaboration, and on-ground practice can evolve to meet this critical moment for people and planet. This discussion today with alliance leaders from across the globe will help us get to the heart of the enabling conditions for conservation. And there's no better time to explore the role of collective impact, enabling policy, shared strategy, and a united voice than when facing times of rapid change and disruption across the globe. Organisations such as the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts, the Land Trust Alliance in the US, and Eurosite operating across Europe, and of course my own, the Australian Land Conservation Alliance, face similar challenges and opportunities as national or continental organisations. And these challenges, these organisations have formalised membership structures. They act as platforms for collaboration, capacity building, and for advocacy. These functions enhance the ability of members to achieve shared conservation goals. and these organisations play a critical role in addressing environmental challenges by uniting diverse stakeholders, including land trusts, governments, NGOs, and communities. So I'm absolutely thrilled both to have you all joining the conversation today, but particularly to the panel, including Jennifer Miller-Herzog from the Land Trust Alliance in the USA, Renata Woodward of the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts, and Tilman Disselhoff from Europe, will all zone in on the conditions required to ensure policy, funding and capacity can remain resilient, and explore what is required to ensure the civic sector can take on the challenges presented. So in order to kick off, Robin, I might ask you to stop sharing your screen, thank you, and we can see the panel. So fantastic to have you all joining us. By way of introducing each of you to the panel, it'd be great if you could describe your alliance, its scale and its scope, and who you represent, and perhaps one of the biggest challenges or opportunities that you are supporting your sector to address at this time. And, you know, in no particular order, maybe just start, go Jennifer, Renata and Tilman.
Jody, thank you for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues from around the globe. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Jennifer Miller-Herzog. I'm the Chief Program Officer with the Land Trust Alliance in the United States. We are a network and an alliance of land trusts and land conservationists that is now 43 years old. We were founded in 1982. And we were established by land trust leaders and land conservation leaders who saw the need for a network that would do a couple of different things. The first would be to facilitate expert-based and peer learning, to foster continuous improvement in how land trusts do their work, connect them, and help them get continuously better at doing land conservation. To provide strength in numbers. Land trusts are deeply local organizations in most of the places they work, and it's important to have them connected to a larger community, and to provide policy support and legal support for land conservation to help build the framework that supports land conservation in the United States. So today, we continue to do all of those things, and we serve as the voice of the land trust community in the United States. We represent and serve a community of nearly 950 member land trusts. Land trusts work in 93% of US counties. So the breadth and depth of this community is incredible. They are diverse in their geography, in the programmatic breadth that they represent as organizations. They all have land conservation as a central activity. Many of them are involved in other activities, restoration work, public education, youth education. They're diverse in the communities that they serve. Their staff sizes, almost half of our members are all volunteer land trusts. And then we have members like the Nature Conservancy and the Trust for Public Land in the US. So we've taken the breadth of the entire community. They're very diverse in their financial resources and sizes. We think of ourselves as a mature alliance, and we are working every day to keep up with the growing and shifting landscapes that we are working in. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. I think the topic is very, very relevant. And one of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we are seeing, we're seeing many, I hope we'll get into those today. One thing I'm hearing a lot about is the weight of stewardship, the responsibility that land trusts have taken on to steward land in perpetuity. This feels like a challenge that's born out of the success and maturity of our US land conservation movement. We've collectively conserved a lot of land. It is something absolutely to celebrate. I am also hearing from land trusts, though, that when we have committed to stewarding that land in perpetuity, forever, that is a huge responsibility. We are finding that it is growing increasingly complex. We're seeing rising costs for monitoring easements, increased legal challenges to easements, and we're seeing an increasingly dynamic nature of the landscape that we are living in. So climate impacts, evolving economic development, new demands for land and natural resources. All of this is making the long-term work of land conservation more challenging, and it's driving us as a conservation community to continually evolve our knowledge and skills, which is our job as a network to help facilitate. So that's just a quick introduction from me and what we're seeing on the ground here in the US.
Thanks, Jennifer. Wonderful. Always on our toes. There is so much complexity in the work that goes on the ground. Thanks for sharing that. Renata.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Jennifer and Jody, and thank you everybody for being here today, whichever time zone you are in. My name is Renata Woodward, and I'm speaking with you from the land of Wabanaki people in the Eastern Township of province of Quebec in Canada. And I will not repeat what Jennifer said because we have similar challenges and similar hopes and similar mission of the organization, but I will rather tell you a story because in compared to the United States, in Canada, we are a little bit behind in the land trust movement, even though there used to be organization developed earlier in 2000. It didn't work quite well. And for about 10 years, we didn't have alliance. And about 3 years ago, the Alliance of Canadian Land Trust has been established by regional alliances and as well as regional provincial land trusts across different provinces in Canada. And most of the pressing issues that was identified why this organization was actually created is there was complete lack of national awareness for local and grassroots land trusts. So the land trusts themselves actually have asked those provincial alliances and leaders from provincial land trusts to establish these national organizations. And we became charity in 2022, and we work really closely with those regional alliances in British Columbia, Quebec, and Ontario, as well as Maritimes and Prairies regions. And our role is, first of all, to be the advocate or lobbyist for the land trust sector on the national level, to communicate about land trusts to Canadians, so we can bring the wealth and land conservation volunteers into the sector. And we also communicate with municipalities and make sure that land trusts from each region have access to tools that might be available, for example, in one province, but not the other. So what we are trying to do now is we did a stock taking exercise where we took all the programs that exist in the different provinces, and now we are trying to offer them nationally. So we, as I said, we are in infancy. We are only 3 years old organization, but we are going strong, and we have 136 members out of the 150 existing land trusts in Canada. And the way we structured the membership, just to make it a little bit easier, is that the provincial alliances have a membership of their land trusts, and those land trusts are automatically our members unless they choose not to be so. So they have a clear choice to decide not to be our members. And so far we've been getting quite success in all of these land trusts wanting to be our members. And as a matter of fact, we are starting to recruit some members into those provincial alliances who then become also our members. So I think I will stop there. Similarly to Jennifer, land trusts have same opportunities and challenges in a different light, and where at the ACLT, we are really trying to look at the opportunities, because it is a scary place, the challenges sometimes. So right now we have the privilege of really looking at the opportunities and figuring out how can we advance the land trust sector on national level, not only to government, but to the Canadians, so it grows.
Fantastic. Thanks, Renata. And though only young, responding to need, which is such a great way to set the organisation up when you are absolutely needed. So congratulations on getting where you are. Tillman, over to you.
Well, thanks, Jody. Hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar names in the list of participants today. My name is Tillman Disselhoff. I'm an employee of the Nature and Biodiversity Conservation Union in Germany, so that's abbreviated NABU. And I represent my organization on the board of Eurocide, which is one of our, let's say, European umbrella organizations. So I am currently the president of the board of Eurocide in that faculty. I've been on the board for 4 or 5 years now. And I hope I can stay there for another couple of years. Eurocide is a network of land conservation practitioners from various European countries. We were founded in 1989, so a little younger than the LTA, Jennifer, but already a mature network. And it was established on the eve of the UN Rio Summit that you may or may not remember in 1990. And with that came important legislation on EU level for the conservation of habitats and species, the EU Habitats Directive, which created a network of European nature reserves, which are increasingly outdatedly called Natura 2000. But yeah, that was a common denominator for a lot of conservation practitioners to figure out what to do with that new legislation, how to implement it, how to create these reserves, how to create management plans, and so on and so forth. And that was basically the reason why Eurocide came into existence. So I think a very similar start, let's say, to the LTA, where you had a very concrete need for exchange of information. And, you know, fast forwarding 36 years later, Natura 2000 is still there. We don't have many, let's say, challenges anymore with managing it. At least we know what to do about it. It's not perfect, but it's now established. So the mission and the focus of Eurocide has changed over time, obviously. It has gone beyond the boundaries of nature reserves. So we look at land and nature conservation regardless of whether we're working inside or outside protected areas. And that opens up a whole new set of partners and stakeholders, obviously. So private landowners being among the most important constituency or partners for a network nowadays. So that leads us to the whole universe, let's say, of private land conservation, which I would say 10 years ago as a term was rather unfamiliar to most people in Europe. And nowadays it's entering the vocabulary also of official EU legislation and other political documents. So it's becoming a more common idea to use collaborative, voluntary instruments for conservation rather than just regulatory ones such as protected area designation. And this is, we're trying to position Eurocide as the network representing that community of practice. So conservation practitioners, both from the public and the private sector. Our membership is very diverse. We have large organizations, such as my own, with 1 million members in Germany, a turnover of close to 100 million per year, down to individual members at Eurocide. So a natural person can also become a member. We have a little less than 100 members, spread across 26 or so EU countries, or European countries, I should say. And that, kind of leads me to what are the main challenges for Eurocide, aside from funding, which is a perpetual issue in the conservation sector for everyone, forever. Increasingly so for networks who work, let's say, on the meta level and influence or have indirect outcomes very often. we have a very diverse membership, and that means we have very diverse interests and perspectives, and bridging those, finding common denominators, such as the Natura 2000 network in '89. That's a challenge for us. So we're constantly reassessing our added value for our members, looking at current political, social trends, new legislation, and also we need to always look at other umbrella organizations or networks on European level that also work on things. So Europe is a very crowded space, also in the conservation community. So we're not the only European network out there, and we have tried to focus on this practitioner's perspective. We're more concerned about how laws will be implemented on the ground, what that means for organizations on the ground and private landowners and so forth, rather than trying to, let's say, influence the headline objectives of new policy. So this is kind of we try to find complementary roles to other networks as well. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Back to you, Jody. Thank you.
Thanks, Tillman. It's just so impressive to think about the continental scale, that is occurring through Euroside. And again, congratulations to you too. Just by way of context for those online who are not familiar as well with the Australian Land Conservation Alliance. So we're a peak body. We represent organisations that are protecting, managing and restoring nature across privately managed land in Australia. We have about 20 members. We growing deliberately, slowly, and building that membership of trust and relationships across organisations. We're operating at a different scale here in Australia in terms of the number of conservation organisations operating than there might be in other places, but increasingly diversifying our membership, ensuring that we represent a much broader diversity of organisations that are operating across Australia. And we're focused also on policy advocacy to try and make sure that there are the policy conditions for organisations to undertake their important work. We're trying to build sector capability and capacity, and we are trying to also increase the funding and finance that flows through to the sector. So there's some of the things that the Australian Land Conservation Alliance is working on. We've been operating for about 15 years, and we're inspired by the Land Trust Alliance and the International Land Conservation Network in the US. And when our founding members spent some time over there 15 years ago, came home and imagined what an alliance could look like in Australia. And here we are 15 years later with a successful and building alliance. And Tillman, you make a really great point there as well around private land conservation is now on the agenda here in Australia in a way that it wasn't previously, because the alliance exists and has been really prosecuting that argument for some time now. One of the things that was really interesting when I explored different land trusts in the US through my Churchill Fellowship, and there, as you say, Jennifer, there are thousands of them. It's phenomenal, the scale, all operating at different scales, serving different communities. There were 4 common challenges that came up across those I spoke to. Now, I certainly didn't speak to thousands of them, but I spoke to a good number. Some of those are funding constraints, balancing competing interests, development land use pressures, managing a wide diversity of stakeholders, and legal and policy barriers. So as alliances, what is your role in building the enabling conditions for land trusts to thrive? Renata, you're off mute, so maybe we jump to you and
Sure. What we are, as I mentioned previously, we are working on the advocacy for a land trust. And we are a much younger organization than the Land Trust Alliance, but together with those regional alliances that are well-established organizations, we have enabling conditions that we are creating enabling conditions that land trusts can strive in. So we are advocating for sustainable funding models and facilitating knowledge sharing and supporting collaboration across jurisdictions, as well as engaging with government and other stakeholders on legal and policy reforms to enhance the work of land trusts. And particularly right now, we have a campaign that is advocating for renewal on funding that helps land trusts to acquire new properties and take care of them, as well as we are trying to persuade the federal government to develop some sort of endowment fund. We call it Canada Conservation fund for land trust that would build land trust endowments funds, and that way they can take care of the lands in perpetuity. And I must say that we've been quite successful. We got the ear from the politicians. However, it takes years to build it. So that is one of the things we are trying to do. And because in Canada, the funding for environment is quite limited, let's say in compared to health. So we are trying to, the market is definitely competitive. So we are trying to figure out how do we sell the land trust's work? How do we tie it to national and international goals? And how do we still show how the work on the ground reflects and feeds into these larger goals?
Yeah,
So
great.
that's just one example. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Tillman, anything that you wanted to expand on beyond those examples of the ways that the role you play in building those enabling conditions for the land trust to thrive?
Yeah, thank you. The one thing that I've witnessed in our network is that we're trending from just being, let's say, a convener or facilitator of exchange of information to a broker almost, where we try to help our members access funding that otherwise would be inaccessible to them. And that goes beyond informing them about a funding opportunity. It means curating project consortia, creating ideas for projects, and writing the actual proposal. Connecting them along common themes and that kind of stuff. And particularly in the last years, private finance has let's say, entered the scene, so to speak, or the radar has popped up on our radar. So we are really focusing on that right now, to help our members understand how they can turn their worthwhile projects into projects that are also interesting from a private finance perspective. So thinking about the timeline of revenues that may come from those projects, if there are any, thinking about pricing, that kind of stuff, where traditionally we just looked at what needs to be done, what are the costs, is there a funding program that can reimburse our costs, and it's obviously a different conversation if you talk to an investor or a financer from private sector. So that's let's say a focus of ours, where I think we hope to be useful to our members, and it answers to the funding shortage that we are witnessing, with public programs being rather cut back than expanded. But even if they still exist, they sometimes are inaccessible for our members for one reason or the other. Many times just because they are by themselves too small to bring in a relevant project, let's say, or a sizable project. So they need to form partnerships with others, and this is where we can help. Yeah, so this is a focus of ours. And another is maybe restoration on the agenda. So it's a bit of a schizophrenic situation where nature protection or conservation, maintaining the status quo is already increasingly difficult, and at the same time our ambitions in terms of restoration grow every day, and it's out of necessity because we're losing nature, so we have to restore it. But it happens simultaneously. So we're focusing on landscape scale restoration, trying to be ambitious about that, and trying to nest that idea in our community of practice. Well, on the every day our members have to deal with fighting, for maintaining the status quo at least, and against the erosion of what they're trying to protect. But nevertheless, there's a bit of political and legal, let's say, tailwind in the restoration agenda with the new nature restoration law in the EU, with the decade of ecosystem restorations and that kind of stuff. And it's also attractive for funders. So we're trying to help our members put this into practice. Yeah.
Telman, it's I think just hearing you speak and you as well, Renata, I think one of the challenges always is dealing with the issues of the day while keeping your eyes on the horizon as an alliance to try and scan and make sure you're keeping ahead and abreast of the trends that are going to influence your members down the track. Jennifer, there's something particularly unique, and you're welcome to expand on that question, but just diving into one element of, I know, the role that you play about the Land Trust Alliance is in accrediting and setting standards and policy guidelines for your sector. And I know, Renata, you're increasingly moving into that space as well. Can you describe, Jennifer, what led to the development of that practice and what it does for your sector? And if you want to answer the previous question, feel free to quickly, but then, moving on to this one.
Yes, I will. I want to add just two other elements and I think Renata, you and Tillman are also working on these. And I'll just add, I feel like all of our work is both proactive and responsive always, right? We are trying to help create those enabling conditions and also help the land trust community be ready for whatever is coming. So we are absolutely scanning the horizon for emerging issues and building the readiness of the community to respond. That can look like poorly sited energy development or data centers right now in the US, the accelerating climate change impacts, and attacks on voluntary conservation we're seeing as well. We're seeing a lot of some anti-conservation sentiment arise in some places, which is another one of the challenges. Renata, you mentioned how sometimes land trust work can be a very well-kept secret, even though it's having enormous benefits to communities on the ground where that work is done. That is a role we've taken on increasingly recently as the Land Trust Alliance, like as the voice of the land trust community. We also feel like we have to build the awareness and appreciation of land trust work kind of at the macro scale, because the benefits that land trusts provide to their communities, I think, are well understood in community, but not necessarily in aggregate. And that's a strength of ours if we can tell that story effectively. So expanding constituency is really important. And I would say also expanding the partnerships that land trusts are working with is another piece. So engaging broader swaths of communities, deepening the partnerships and expertise that are helping to drive land conservation. For us at the Alliance, this is really deepening and expanding our partnership work with Indigenous land conservation leaders, Indigenous-led organizations, and supporting the allyship of non-Indigenous land trusts to work as effective partners on Indigenous land issues and be able to do that in culturally appropriate ways. So there's also all the legal and policy work that I know that my colleagues do as well. So, but thinking about the public trust aspect of land conservation in the U.S., we have a federal tax incentive for land conservation. So because of the benefits that land conservation provides. And we feel really strongly that, we need to uphold an incredibly high standard as a community. So speaking to the standards and practices that the Land Trust Alliance helped to develop with the community itself really initially and continually sort of has identified the need for standards that provide what we call the ethical and technical guidelines for operating a land trust. There was a really strong sense as the standards were being conceptualized that land trusts did not want to constantly reinvent their own wheel in their own communities. They wanted to share knowledge about what a strong, ethical, technically expert and sustainable organization looked like. So they wanted to share that knowledge with one another, and they wanted to grow stronger as organizations and as a community. So we established the land trust standards in 1989 originally, so very early in our evolution. And that was done with the entire community. We think of the standards as a very broad tent. All members of the Land Trust Alliance are required to adopt those standards through an action by their board of directors. The standards are revised periodically with the full engagement of the entire Land Trust community. It's usually a multi-year process to get feedback and input on what people are seeing emerge, what we need to do to update the standards. Sometimes those are little technical fixes that need to happen as a result of changes in regulations or laws, and sometimes they are sort of deep and important philosophical shifts in the community and in the practice of land conservation. And I think a really important thing is that these are just built from the ground up, from within our community. They do not come down from on high, although everyone's like, well, the Alliance imposes the standards. I'm like, yes, but that's not exactly how that happens. This community, right, works together to help define what excellent land conservation work looks like for us. The other piece of a related piece of that is our accreditation program as well. So accreditation, you know, as over time as an alliance and as a community, we've also come to appreciate that, you know, we are upholding public trust. And that our community is only as strong as sort of its most delicate link. We need all land trusts to, you know, be able to be strong and sustainable organizations, whatever their size. The integrity and the quality of the work of all of our peer land trusts makes a difference, and it does reflect on the community as a whole. We want land trusts as an entity to be viewed positively and understood to be delivering great benefits. So, you know, early in the 2000s, there was actually a Senate Finance Committee investigation into land conservation and into practices around conservation easements. This was 20 years ago at this point. But that investigation called for increased public disclosure and increased oversight to expand transparency and to prevent abuse of tax deductions available to conservation easements. And we as a community recognize we need to do our own quality control as well, right? So as a community, the land trust movement decided to sort of self-regulate, and they asked us to help do that by launching an accreditation program that helps to build and that it recognizes publicly strong land trusts. It fosters public confidence in land conservation. And it helps ensure the long-term protection of land. I was talking about the, you know, the weight of stewardship and the weight of forever that our community is feeling. Accreditation addresses things like organizational sustainability and resilience. And so that is also part of how we are going to deliver on forever, is to ensure that we're strong organizations looking into the future. So the accreditation program was started in 2006. There are accreditation review elements that are drawn from the standards, but they are related but not the same. And today, 20 years later, 19 years later, there are 478 accredited land trusts. So more, you know, about half our membership, and those accredited land trusts are operating in 46 US states. And I think one of the most important stats is that 84% of all land and easements held by land trusts in the US are held by accredited land trusts. So if you think about, you know, risk management over time, right? Like making sure you have strong, sustainable, capable organizations who are stewarding the protected private land in the US, you know, 84% of that land is protected by organizations that have met accreditation standards. And that has elevated public trust. It's reduced the risk for those land trusts of their own holdings, and it's increased the reputation and credibility of the community overall as well.
That's amazing. And just, you know, such scale, but also, you know, I think commitment and resourcing put to that, both by the Alliance, but also by the individual land trusts, yeah, to make the commitment to become accredited, to meet the standards. Really great to hear. And Renata, you know, it's a newer journey for you, Why and how have you adapted the LTA model to suit your purpose? You're on mute, Renata.
I mentioned the
There you are.
organization, the national organization that existed but didn't quite work out. One great legacy they left behind is adoption of the Canadian Land Trust standards and practices from US. So it was a great setup for the Canadian Land Trusts, and a new organization that has assumed the charitable status of that old national organization became actually the accreditation body. So in Canada now we have that accreditation body as well. Similarly to US, we are part of reviewing the standards and practices, and then the other organization called Center for Land Conservation is working on the accreditation. We have 6 land trusts accredited so far, but you have to remember this is only 2-year-old program, right? So it's quite new. But there was a really interesting spin in this because we didn't have Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts, and all the land trusts got together, and it was proposed that the accreditation will happen, which is great. Nobody is against it. However, the land trusts themselves said, wait a minute, we have accreditation program, but we don't have alliance who help us to get there. So this is where the 100% support for creation of that Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts happened, because it's not that the land trusts were opposed to the accreditation, but they felt there's a missing piece, and that's where we fill the spot. And while the Center for Land Conservation takes care of the accreditation process, the Alliance of Canadian Land Trusts helps those land trusts across Canada to build their capacity and implement programs that help them to get there.
Fantastic. Yeah, really, really super interesting. And I think, Tillman and Elka, we don't have those accreditation processes, and it's super interesting to understand and explore what that looks like, and the resourcing and the time and energy and the community need that's driving a lot of that work. I'm going to shift tacks now to the networking and capacity building part of what alliances do. Last year, the Australian Land Conservation Alliance convened our annual conference. We've been holding annual conferences since 2015 as a formal side event to last year particularly was a formal side event to the world's first Global Nature Positive Summit in Australia. There we brought over 400 delegates to Sydney to take high-level policy discussions that were happening at this Global Nature Positive Summit to action through our event, which happened immediately after. It was timely, it was energising, and it was meaningful for the delegates who participated. So we all hold annual conferences, I think, Jennifer, Renata, Tillman, yep. And we have them just around the corner, I think, for most of us. So there's something so powerful about building a strong and connected network, about delivering capacity building opportunities for the sector. We're probably not going to have time for all of us to go into deep, depths about our conference programs, but for those of you that maybe have them right coming up, or you've just done one, can you describe one of the most high impact capacity or network building activities that you've delivered? It might not be your conference, it might be something else in this last year, and specifically what impact it's delivered. And maybe actually, Tillman, I know you've just finished, it wasn't maybe your annual conference, but a finance related event perhaps that you might want to talk to.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. So our annual conference is up in September, so very much looking forward to that. It has gone on every year since '89, so in different EU or European countries. That's always fun to travel to a new country for the annual meeting. And you were alluding to the conservation finance bootcamp. So we have done now for the 3rd year in a row a European conservation finance bootcamp. The original was invented, so to speak, by the Conservation Finance Network in the US. I think they've done their 20th now this year, and we they very graciously allowed us to steal that idea from them and copy it and transform it to the European context. And it has very quickly become the most popular or best, let's say, evaluated event that we are offering. So we've struck a nerve there. I spoke about private finance earlier. The Conservation Finance Bootcamp focuses on that. It tries to connect the finance world with the nature conservation world. So we see it as a training, as an exercise, as much as a networking event where we're actually building a community of practice, again, from our membership, but not limited to that. It's an invitation only event with round about 40 to 50 attendees that convene for several days to talk about conservation finance. And about a quarter of them or a third return the next year. So there's a turnover, but we also try to maintain some of the people we've invited before as to cater to that purpose of community building. So yeah, those in-person meetings, I think, are invaluable, and they cannot replace by online meetings. I mean, this is something we've learned. We've widened our toolbox, so to speak, and we're doing great webinars such as today. But being there in person and having the chance to talk to people just is irreplaceable. And in particular, if you spend a couple of days together, and not just a few hours or a day, and if you manage to create an atmosphere where people feel like they can share their real concerns and interests, and they don't just have to, present a flashy PowerPoint presentation, but they can actually get into the nitty-gritty of their work and find like-minded people with similar challenges and so forth. And so this is what we're trying to do. We have a third format, which is called the study tour. So we go on group excursions, and that's also quite well regarded in our membership.
Wonderful. And it's great to see the diversity of activities and way things are being delivered. Renata, you've got 10 seconds to give your pitch for your upcoming conference.
Actually, I am just super excited because this year our conference will be also quite pivoting around building relationship with indigenous land trusts and indigenous organizations who like to do conservation on private land. And there will be specific sessions just for those indigenous land trusts at the beginning and at the end of the organization. And in the middle, there'll be the mingling with conventional land trusts and conversations that we are hoping will take the private land conservation in Canada into the next level, because it's really important, and it's part of the truth and reconciliation we are playing. So I'm just sharing because I'm really excited about this.
That's great. And Jennifer, what's your 10-second pitch for your upcoming event?
Well, this webinar was my 1 hour to not think about rally, which is in 2 weeks. Literally outside my office are piles of boxes. We're packing out today, like everything goes on freight. But Jody, you had also asked us a question about like what some of our most impactful work, and Rally is one of those. It is a great professional development opportunity. It is like such an exciting convening of our community as well. Really fun. But I was thinking about the impactful work that networks do. And one of the things I would say is that sometimes it's the thing that's not on your work plan, which is a rapidly changing circumstance you weren't expecting. So I was thinking back to how quickly the federal context is changing in the US right now. And all the work that we've done to help land trusts understand what that means for their work. The same thing happened when COVID hit. And I actually think the power of networks, when you don't have a framework to understand what's happening, is actually accelerated significantly. Like that you're all the people that land trusts will call, or that your land conservation colleagues will call when you need to get together, get a bunch of smart people in the room together, trade information, and group problem solve. How do we understand the current situation, and how do we continue to advance our work in that context? So I actually, we'll be talking about all of those things at Rally, which is a great opportunity to do that. But I also think Tillman, you spoke to the power of convening for networks, and I think that power expands exponentially when we're looking at a new situation we haven't seen before as a community. So,
yep. And I expect that is that's much in demand from you right now over there at this very time. So wishing all of you the best in a fortnight to come. I think, Jennifer, while you're off, I think the other thing, and you touched on this earlier in the discussion, alliances play this important role in demonstrating how conservation positively impacts the environment, economy, and society, and people don't always really understand that. So how important is it that you tell that story?
Yeah, I think I mean, and Renata, you and I have talked about this too. Like, it is critically important. I think, land trusts, again, are staff land trusts are such doers. We're like, we are here to do the projects, to do the restoration, to deliver the access, whatever that looks like. And as a community, as a conservation community, not always good at sort of trumpeting the victories, celebrating those, telling the stories. But that narrative does need to get out. And we actually need to be in charge of that narrative, telling our own story about the benefits that land conservation provides and the great work that land trusts do. I think, that is part of how you build a constituency, how you build the public support for policy and law that creates those enabling conditions. That's how you advance your proactive agenda. I also think it's part of what provides a good defense when and if a challenge to voluntary conservation emerges. We've seen it happen at many levels of government over the last decade in the US. Sometimes there's a local law, there's a county issue that comes up, a state legislative proposal. If people understand the work that land trusts do and the benefits that provides, it's a lot harder for anti-conservation efforts to gain traction. So it is, I think, both our best, proactive, offense to advancing the agendas that we define, and it also helps us prevent opponents of conservation from defining us before we've had the chance to sort of build that narrative. So I think it's one of the most important aspects of the resilience of our community that we can invest in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you touched there, and I think everyone has touched on the things that are challenging, their country, their continent, the place that they're working in. It's fair to say we are living in a rapidly changing time, right across the globe, from global politics and war, economic downturns, changing community sentiments, the increasing impacts of climate change. They're affecting our daily lives. And you've all touched on the fact that the alliances are more important than ever in retaining that momentum, in supporting those communities through those times. You've really just talked to that. So to round things out, because this will be the last question, how do you continue to hold strong to what matters while adapting to the changing circumstances? Tillman, let's throw to you first.
Thanks, Jody. Well, for me, it's really being part of this community. And I mean this, in the widest term, like this global community. I mean, the fact that we as regional or continental networks meet today, is for me, what do you call it, a feel-good place, or, very comforting, so to speak. And I don't have enough time to emphasize how inspirational the work of the LTA and ILCN and other networks has been for Eurosite. And I'm not just talking about me personally, but the entire network, the secretariat, and our board. We've looked very closely at what you guys are doing, and sometimes blatantly just steal your very good ideas. And so this really helps me. It's the power of good ideas from others to deal with difficult situations. That's, I think, is one of the biggest aspects of our work as networks, and it's really important to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree, Tillman. We've done the same. Still all their stuff. It's the only way to go. Renata, what about for you?
Sure. Similar, like Tillman, being rooted in the community and listening and get our work grounded in the long-term impact, but operate in the real time is the goal and strategy that we are taking because the world's shifting really rapidly. And while we are nimble, then we also want to be principled that help us to keep going. But I think for me, there are two very important things. You know, when you go for job interview and you need to talk about yourself and saying, oh, I am this, I am that. I love this alliance work when you talk about the land trust and their work and highlighting their work. It's not about the alliance, it's about the sector, about the individual land trust. I really love that. So continuing that work, working for the land trust, reminding myself we are working for the land trust, and also mobilizing this land trust in as much work as possible, especially in the advocacy, is, I feel, really crucial and important. So, you know, it's not Renata going to see the Minister of Environment. It's Renata and Regional Alliance and some local land trusts to show the examples and to really for Canadians and government understand what the community is. So mobilization is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Renata. Jennifer, what about you?
It is the same. For me, it's not being above the fray, it's being below the fray. Closest, as close to the ground as you can get. Being with land trust practitioners, with land conservation practitioners, the people who are getting the work done on the ground, who are working in communities, who are working in partnership. That's what keeps me going. I will say I joined a group of stewardship staff on a call this spring, and it was early in the new administration. We had just heard that federal funding was being frozen. No one understood the lay of the landscape there yet. We were trying to interpret that for our members. We also there were a bunch of executive orders that were coming out at the time that we were trying to understand the impact on land conservation, how that might affect land trust work. And then I joined the stewardship call, and I got to hear people talk about putting up their signs at the, like, and how did you manage through this issue? And it was balm to, it was just like, it was below the fray. It was down where the work is getting done. I thanked everyone afterwards, and it's just a powerful reminder that this work continues. We will always find a way. People care about land. There are people who are doing great work on the ground all the time. So these changes affect how that work gets done, but the commitment to doing the work remains. So that's absolutely what keeps me going.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is it's a privilege and a responsibility, and yeah, fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing those reflections, and wholeheartedly agree with them. Global conservation alliances like those you've heard from, Tillman, Jennifer, Renata, the organisations that you represent, demonstrate the power of collaboration in addressing pressing environmental, but more than that, we've heard today, societal challenges. By learning from the successes and strategies of organisations like each of yours, for me, the Australian Land Conservation Alliance can further develop its approach to delivering value to our members and advancing land and water conservation in Australia. And the networks that we provide, but then the networks that we create among ourselves are so vital and important. I would like to really thank the International Land Conservation Network for creating the space and the platform for individuals like ourselves to come together to address these collective global challenges. It's been through our connection at the Global Congress in Quebec that we're now meeting formally quarterly, really, to progress a broader collective knowledge sharing agenda. And I'm really enjoying and appreciating the opportunity to connect more strongly with you all. And with a strong focus on advocacy, capacity building, collaboration and communication, our alliances remain well positioned to lead this transformative change for the communities that we've just talked about that we serve. It's worth noting because, the last time we did all meet was in Quebec at the International Land Conservation Network's Global Congress, that the Australian Land Conservation Alliance will be hosting the next International Land Conservation Network's Global Congress here in Australia. It will be in October in 2027. So you have time book your tickets and flights now, and I hope to see all of you there. To my fellow panelists, Jennifer, Renata, Tillman, I really want to thank you for your time, your experience, your generosity in sharing your knowledge to ensure that we can have the biggest, most positive impact on nature and the people who steward it. Thank you, everybody who's joined us this evening. It's been wonderful to have you with us, and good luck for your work and the day ahead. Thank you, everyone.